Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. I'm Rob, your host, and today's show is about wine again. It's going to be a fun episode today, going into a region I'm excited to explore, one that I've been wanting to get into a little bit more. I've tried a few wines from there, but I'm not real versed on the wines from there, so I'm looking forward to getting educated. We have a guest today who's been on the show before. Simon with MudoVino is back and gonna help us out through this episode. Simon, how you doing, man?
Rob, I'm fantastic, man. It's a beautiful day. The sun's out, and we've got plenty of wine to drink.
It's kind of nice to see the sun again. I don't know how often I say that in Houston, but it's been cloudy and rainy for the last few days, so it's kind of nice to see the big bright thing pop out again.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. I mean, it could be snowing tomorrow, and it wouldn't surprise me. But that's good old.
That's Texas weather.
Good old, Houston weather, right?
Yeah. Hey, well, let's let everybody know if they haven't heard the last podcast or a couple ago, you were on the show, and we did an episode then talking about Argentinian wines, and that was a fun episode. And then we went on to do a Zoom virtual tasting, which was really cool. And that's kind of what we're going to do. It's not kind of, it is what we're going to do with this show today. We're going to jump into Spain, right?
Absolutely. The topic we're talking about today is Spain, and what we really want to talk about mainly is something that I think kind of hits home for everybody, is talking about good valued wines. I know in these times that we're in right now, I think value is a very important thing. And when we talk about quality and price points, I think that Spain's there. That area.
Yeah. Let me ask you this,
Spain there,
when you talk about old world wines, I mean, the three regions I think that are thought of are, France, Italy, and Spain. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely, Rob. And, it's funny you mentioned that in that particular order, because that's kind of how we refer to some of the top producing regions in the world, and in that order that you mentioned is kind of how it lies. So we talk about French production, cranking out a lot of wines, exporting all over the world, and then Italy certainly pumping out a lot of wine as well. Spain falls third on that list. They just typically experience a little bit lower yields. So they don't grow as many grapes, but they have a lot of acreage under vine in the whole country of Spain. So when we talk about quality and we're talking about low yields and producers that have been doing this for centuries, and certainly the same thing in France and Italy. But like we said, we always kind of incorporate, when we talk about old world wines and good quality products coming from those areas, those kind of ring true to a lot of people as France, Italy, and Spain. But as you know, Spain, just a tremendous amount of history, as is those other areas. But, as we read about Spain and all the different influences that have happened in that country, we start off with the Phoenicians, and then we go to the Roman rule that happened in that country for a long, long time, and then the fall of the Roman Empire. Then we get over to the Visigoths, and then the Moors after that, and then basically the reconquest of Spain. So a lot of different influences, a lot of ups and downs, I would say. Different influences that are happening in the country certainly did have different effects on the wine trade at that time.
When I have the perception that, when I think old world, France and Italy comes to mind right away, that's a fair thing to say. It's not something that's not accurate.
No, there's really no gray area when it comes to that.
Okay.
That's basically what we refer to as old world wines.
Okay.
And
I just don't,
countries
I'm more gravitated to France and Italy when I first got into old world. And, I say shame on me, that I'm starting to find out there's some great wines in Spain. And I just kind of wondered why I wasn't, when I went into a wine shop or something and asked somebody about old world wines, they go, you want French or Italian? It was never, Spain didn't seem to be brought up that much. And I wondered why that was. Why am I missing out on that? But is that the case, or is that just my perception? It's not really the way it is with wine drinkers.
We're certainly seeing a pickup in Spanish wines on the shelves in major retailers. Certainly not as much as French and Italian wines, but they have several different regions. As is Spain has plenty of regions to drink from. But I think my perception when I first started getting into wines, uh, internationally, and I got out of the domestic drinking phase that I was in, where I only drank California wines. Got into Washington and Oregon after that, but as I got out there, Spain didn't really jump out at me also. It wasn't until many, many years after that where it took me it took me somebody kind of guiding my hand and saying, hey, you should really check this out from Spain. Because to be perfectly honest with you, and I think I've told this story on the last podcast, but it's an important story because I think there's a lot of people that have been in the circumstance that I have. When I first wanted to get into Spanish wines, all that you really saw on retail shelves were Tempranillo coming from Rioja,
Right.
which it's the most widely planted red grape there in the country, and certainly the most popular by far. But there are many, many other areas that are producing phenomenal wines and other varietals that you don't typically hear of. And so this podcast and the Zoom tasting that's going to follow next week are going to explore these different regions. Now, we are going to drink a Tempranillo from Rioja, one of the many producers in that area, but we're not going to only stay within that particular region and only drink Tempranillo. We're going to get to experience some Monastrell, some Garnacha, some Albariños, so on and so on. And then we're going to actually save the whole segment of sherry for another time. That's a whole section in itself. But,
Okay.
yeah. So, and when I experienced going to these retail chains, and that's really the only options that they had on the shelves. And if you didn't know which particular producer to pick out of the lineup, Tempranillo, to me, Tempranillo, when it's done bad, it's bad. It's very bad, and it's almost not even drinkable to me. And not to start off on a sour note there, no pun intended, but there's so many producers out there, and I think generally people are starting to get the idea now, and they're finding out that, hey, if they do want to export these wines, they're going to have to kind of change the ways a little bit. They can't really stick to that old rustic style with dried fruits and just these stewy fruits and just different flavors, barnyardy kind of flavors with hay and things of that sort. That's kind of a thing in the past. Now, you still do have those classic producers out there that are producing wines like this. But I think a lot more people are starting to basically fine tune their Tempranillos before they ship them out, and more geared up for the more modern palate, I would say. So, and that perception right there, eventually led me to drinking from other areas and other varietals other than Tempranillo.
Yeah, and Tempranillo,
a lot of fun stuff to be had.
Yeah, Tempranillo was the grape that it is dominant, obviously, and that's kind of all I knew when you talked about Spain. So it wasn't until probably the last year or so where I've kind of gotten more exposed to other varietals in Spain, other regions, and man, they have some great wine in Spain. So this is going to be a lot of fun to go through these 6 we'll talk about today, and then doing that virtual wine tasting next Wednesday, which would be, what is that? That's going to be the 28th. That'll be Wednesday, the 28th of April. And 6 p.m. start. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll put some of that information out on the Facebook group page on Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. But people who want to jump on, definitely let us know, and we'll make those arrangements. But it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's jump in. Let's talk about some of these wines we're going to taste next week.
So yeah, like I said, we're going to try to explore different areas, and not just stick to the standard reds. Although I know reds here in Texas are kind of king, when we talk about just what people are drinking out and about. It really doesn't, seasons don't really come into play here. But to me, I really like to sit down and enjoy a nice glass of white wine. And I think it was yesterday or this morning that I walked outside and I was like, well, it's upon us. It's here. And it's hot weather season. So we look for some of these beautiful, refreshing white wines that are coming from this, so a little bit higher acid content, but just refreshing wines. And that's kind of what the kick that I'm on right now. but we'll also talk about a few reds as well. But we'll start off just talking about one of our producers that we represent, and it's called Juve e Camps, and we'll be drinking a cava from that region. It's actually called the Reserva de Familia. Now, cava is a really, really interesting area. There's a lot of history there as well. And before I get into all the rest as well, I just want to let you guys know that something that's very common in our portfolio, I think, out of the 45 producers that we represent from Spain, Portugal, Chile, and Argentina, is we represent family-owned companies or family-owned estates. So there's a couple of exceptions that are either co-ops or have partial ownership by a larger corporation, but that's kind of like I said, I think it's two max that we have in there. So every other producer, a lot of history there, and I think we moved on from talking about the Catena family, and that was kind of a perfect example of fourth generation growers. So a lot of family history there and a lot of integrity, and like I said, it's more of a legacy than it is about the bottom dollar.
Right. That means a lot to people who really
wine.
Yeah, people who appreciate wine appreciate that. Absolutely.
Sure. So, with that said, is we jump into Juve Camps. It's actually the only cava house that we represent, and they're located in the Penedès region, which is, where the main, the bulk of cavas are coming from is up in the northeast.
Okay, you keep saying cavas. What is cava a varietal?
Cava is not a varietal.
Okay,
cava is actually it's a DO, so it's a particular growing region.
Okay.
So that kind of describes the style of wine. But when we talk about sparkling wines coming from Spain, this is the king of them. This is a
sparkling. Okay.
Best. It's a sparkling wine. So
cool.
Like I said, a lot of history there, and
that's going to be a lot of fun to try because I've never had a Spanish sparkling. Obviously we've had Italian, we've had French, we've had California, we've had English bubbles. Never had anything from Spain, so I'm looking forward to that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and speaking of those English bubbles, I just had a bottle just a couple of nights ago, and every one that I've had is pretty solid. So I'm very impressed with what's going on over there.
Yeah, they're doing a good job, no doubt about it.
Yeah. But cava, a lot of history there as well. But this is a very old estate, been there for a while, still family owned and operated in the hands of the original owners. They're now in, I believe it's fourth or fifth generation now, with Marichel taking over the family reins. But all estate grown fruits, all hand riddled and picked, all that good stuff. And cavas are coming to us at a very affordable price. Now, when I talk about affordability with cavas, the original design of cava was to rival champagne houses. That's why cava was created. I think for a long time, maybe they didn't get along, and so they didn't want to import, or due to things that happened over the years, whether they were kind of restricted or kind of cut off from bringing things over from France. So they weren't, the champagne wasn't always flowing back and forth and going back and forth between the countries. So they decided to create their own sparkling wine, and cava was born. And I believe the term was champagne with an X is what they were going to call it. So that was very short lived. So they called it cava. So just to be kind of conscious of the caves that the cava was actually being aged in. So they just decided to go with the word cava. So that's a direct translation to the word cave. But, fast forward, we look at what's on the retail shelves now, and we see what's online. Cavas became this very, very inexpensive wine to drink, whereas when I mean it's meant to rival champagne houses, it's one of very few sparkling wines that's done in the same exact style, which is called the traditional method, as champagne. So the same process, and really they take the same exact approach. You can almost write it down word for word about what this process is and how they use traditional method for making these wines. The only thing the difference is going to be where it's sourced from, for one, and the varietals or the grapes that they actually use to make the cava. So when we refer to Champagne, we talk about the big three grapes, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, used in most Champagne production, or just two of those grapes, or even monovarietals when they make Blanc de Blanc or Blanc de Noir. Kind of the same thing with cavas. They actually have their big three grapes they use in the production of cava, which is Xarel·lo, Macabeo, and Parellada. And those are the grapes that they typically use. So we're talking about slightly different flavor profile done in the same exact method in the way that Champagne does theirs. So little subtle differences here and there, but just overall a different style of wine. Now, I don't want to try and describe this to you over the phone.
Yeah, let's wait and do that when we can taste it on Wednesday. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And then we could kind of talk about the subtle differences between that. And then we can find a lot of similarities there as well between Champagne and cavas, or other sparkling wines for that matter.
Sure.
So
okay.
But yeah, that's just one of the.
That's going to be fun to start
houses.
To start with a sparkling. That'll be cool for that tasting.
Yeah, and what an appropriate time to drink some is right now when it starts to get really nice and warm out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because to me, compared to Champagne, it's a little bit more refreshing to me. It's a little bit lighter in style, and just But we'll get into that when that comes around. And then the other region we're going to talk about is going to be Rías Baixas. And so when we talk about a very popular white varietal that comes out of that area, is called Albarino. So we've seen a good amount of these in retail channels here in the States over the past few years, or even beyond that, but gaining a lot of popularity here as I think more and more people are figuring out.
Why do you think that is? What do people describe the grape and what they're getting in this wine? What is it similar to? Why are people being drawn to it?
So Albariños to me is, it kind of depends what you're used to drinking. Honestly, I've heard people refer to it as a little bit closer to a Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
I've heard people refer to it as more of a Torrontés when we talk about wines coming from Argentina. And I've heard all sorts of different similarities here, all kind of different, just kind of a very unique varietal, just characterized by fresh fruit and a clean and fresh, high acid wines that are meant to stimulate the palate and just give you an overall refreshing feeling. So,
is it indigenous? Is it indigenous to Spain?
Yes, it is.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah. And I need to look at the information, but we don't know exactly when that kind of came to be, or when they started producing a lot of Albariños coming from this area. But we can certainly find that information.
Yeah, we'll talk about it Wednesday. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we're going to jump over, and I it's kind of tough. And as we do these Zoom tastings, we're going to have maps available. We're going to have all the information that we share on a Google Drive. And so, Rob, I think last time you did provide the link so people could just basically get on there and access all that information. And I'm a big map fan. I love maps in any form or fashion. I love new maps. I love ancient maps. I'm a big map guy. I just think it's a little bit easier to visualize about where we're at geographically, because as I'm talking about it, we jumped all the way from the northeast side of Spain, and then we jumped to Rías Baixas, which is basically the furthest northwest that you can be on Spain, bordering Portugal. So we're kind of jumping all over the place, but as we get into this later on this week, we'll have access to the maps, and I invite you guys to follow along with that heavily, so you can kind of just visualize and see where the areas that you're drinking from. And then we're going to go to, we're going to jump all the way back to the east coast of Spain, and then we're going to get to experience a little fun wine. Now, I try to keep this very typical varietals and stuff that's very traditional of each area representing Spain, but this was kind of a one-off. But they've been producing wines here for a while, but we're going to jump to the island of Majorca in the Balearic Island chain. Many of you probably may have vacationed here. If you haven't, I would suggest it highly. Just a beautiful, beautiful place. But anyways, we talk about island wines now. We talk about a lot of maritime influence and a really, really cool, interesting story about the producers that work there. Two native Majorcans who, childhood friends, who have been friends for many, many years, and they decided to start a winery together. And so we tell the story of those two gentlemen, and stylistically, they make some really, really fun wines. But we'll be drinking a wine called Anima Negra, which is the winery, and the wine itself is called Kibia. So we're talking about another white wine that we're experiencing here, but it's kind of funny to see how these island wines have certain flavors imparted on them. So when we talk about things with maritime influence, this wine is a very white, it's a very refreshing white wine, but at the same time, it's got almost like a savoriness quality to it. So it almost it tastes a little salty in a way. So when we talk about food pairings with fresh oysters or any sort of shellfish tower or seafood in general, really, these things go kind of hand in hand, and it's a really, really fun, neat wine. And then that'll be it for the white wines and the sparklings, and then we'll move on to the reds, and we'll go to, as we come in onto the coast, the mainland coast of Spain, coming from Mallorca, we're going to stop in a region called Alicante, and they're producing some phenomenal grapes over there. Most notably Monastrell, coming from that area. Now, Monastrell is the name of the varietal, also known as Mourvèdre in France and Moscato in other places.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is all the same grape. But, yeah, they've been growing Monastrell in this particular area for many, many years. And so we're talking about a very good valued wine that delivers. I always like to tell people that this is a lot of wine for the price that you're getting at. It can really stand up to a lot of different things because it can range from medium to very, very full bodied. But just very, very dark, rich flavors inside of these that pair well with a lot of cured meats, barbecues, and things of that sort. But
so this is a red wine. What's is it a bolder? When you start talking about meats and dark, big meats and steaks and things like that, I'm thinking it's a bigger, bolder kind of red. Is that what it is? To cut through the fat?
Yeah, but it's not overbearing. Okay. I like to describe it as just a lot of wine for the price you get it at. Because typically, on the slide scale, we look at the very big, tannic, heavy, bold wines, and they typically go up in price. It's kind of, like I said, on that scale with, I think, Pinot Noir and a couple other ones being an exception to that rule because Pinot Noir certainly get up there in price. Yeah. Exactly. So, but
so these are like
follows that.
These are a medium plus tannin.
Medium plus tannins, yeah.
Okay.
Just really integrated, softly integrated tannins, but we're just talking about really, really bold fruit flavors here. And, a lot of history in this particular area and, this Monastrell, and it's kind of unique to me when we talk about this inexpensive varietal and how you can get it for the price that you get it at, but they're sourcing these vines, they're sourcing the fruit from these vines that are 50 plus years old. So again, low yield, which means concentrated fruit. And, we're bottling this up and getting it at a really reasonable price, but a really, really fun wine. And when I talk about other red varietals coming out of Spain, this is one of those, one of my top three that I like to talk about.
That sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to trying that one. That sounds really good, actually. Is it, well, I don't want to get too much into it. We'll talk about it Wednesday, but let me do this before we jump to the next wine that you're going to talk about. Let's talk for just a second about, we're in Houston, in this city, this area, the surrounding area. If people want to get these wines, I mean, are these available on the grocery store shelves in the wine shops? Or, I know a guy that might be able to get these too. We can talk about a little bit if they're not available in all the wine shops and grocery stores.
Yeah, and anybody that's attended this podcast before, but for anybody that hasn't, we touched base a little bit about Rob May, gentleman gentleman we all know very well, but Rob is actually a retailer. Now, most of these wines, and here's the thing with the good thing about Rob May and his company called Killer Vino is he is a retailer. He does deliveries as well. And it's not only my portfolio that he works with. You can actually, any kind of wine that you're actually looking for, you can get from Rob, and he is going to find it for you, and he's going to do a good job of doing that. But, the thing about major retail channels is we never know. Certainly we have programs in many different retail channels with some of these wines, not all. Some of these wines are such small production that we cannot put it in a major retailer and offer it to you. Like I said, this is kind of classic of family-owned vineyards. And when we talk about just smaller production or putting it in the right places, it's for a certain crowd of people. And we don't like to just put something wherever it may fit. We like to be strategic about it.
That's where Rob comes in.
That's where Rob comes in, and Rob can certainly get you these wines. I would like to tell you that you can get Tarima from Specs or from Total Wine or something of that sort. And sometimes they've been known to carry those types of wines. But with any retailer, they run programs. I would feel bad of directing somebody to a certain place and they did not have that wine. The good thing about Rob is we look at the Texas inventories and what we have available for the market here. And, it's either we can get it or we can't, so we'll save you a trip. And also Rob will save you the trip of going to the grocery store or said retail channel and getting those wines. He'll deliver to your front doorstep with,
that's the big
mask
point
and gloves on.
That's the big point about Rob is that if you don't see a wine you're looking for, doesn't mean it's, just because you don't see it in the grocery store anymore or at the wine shop doesn't mean it's not available. So, reach out to Rob. His email is killervino@killervino.com. It's that simple. killervino@killervino.com. And, Rob's a great source. He's a good friend to have because, if that wine's available in Texas, he's going to get it for you. If it's not, man, he's a guy who, if he knows you like that wine, he can steer you in a direction that's going to, get you something that's very similar that you're going to enjoy so he's just a great source when it comes to, people who really like wine and want to get some good stuff. He's a great guy to know and is able to, help you continue to keep wine in your cellar, if you will.
Sure. And, I've made this point before, but I'll mention it again that another thing I like about Rob's service is, I told that story about getting that first Tempranillo off the retail shelf. It takes, and everybody's been there before. Everybody has purchased a bottle of wine, taken it home, cracked it open, and they may have been highly disappointed by what was in the bottle. And I'm not just talking about a wine that's corked or bad, but just stylistically, it's not what they were looking for. Now, that's always kind of a gamble, and you're out 18 to 20 bucks, whatever your price range may be. But the good thing about Rob is he's going to save you a step. If you trust Rob enough, he can kind of steer you in the directions. And let's say for that particular instance, if I would have met Rob and said, "Hey, Rob, I'm looking for a really good Tempranillo for under $20." Rob, he's constantly tasting wines. He's constantly on the up and up about what's new, what's out there, what he can get, what he can't get, or what he can eventually get for you. But yeah, I personally taste with Rob pretty often, and we do these tastings pretty often as well. So Rob will basically save you that step.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very, very important thing because, when we head to retail shelves, we see what people are inclined to sell you, because everything basically has something behind it, or if you're just picking something off the retail shelf by yourself, you got to take into consideration that, I hate to say it, but labels do sell wine. People are drawn in by catchy labels or things of that sort, or
sure, we've all done it.
Particular producer, or even a particular producer that they're familiar with, and they make a different varietal or different style of wine, and they have the name attached to it, but maybe that's not their forte. Maybe that's not what they specialize in, and they just cranked out a subpar wine that you're going to buy just based off of a name or a label.
Yeah.
So, the good thing about, like I said, Rob, is he's going to save you that step. He's going to save you the heartache of having that bad bottle and kind of steer you in the right direction. And really, if you want to talk about broadening horizons, what we try to do and what Rob tries to do is basically keep it fresh and let you experience other varietals from all over the world. And every now and then there's just some incredible deals coming from different parts of the world. There may be like a wine coming from southern France that's just the latest and greatest, and it's absolutely phenomenal, and it's a fraction of the price of what you would purchase normally off of a shelf. So
right,
things of that sort. It's just he's a good guy to know. Let's just put it that way.
I think we've given enough love to Rob and Killer Vino. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. But
but he's definitely
people to know, and
he's definitely a great guy to know. And just last thing on Rob and Killer Vino is when we get through all this coronavirus stuff. When you're talking about he lets you explore wines around the world, you're talking about he does tasting events, so you get to taste all these wines before you buy them. Something you can't do in a retail store or a wine shop or something like that. So that's a cool thing that he does, where he has minimum 30 wines open. There's no charge. Just come in and taste wines, and just buy a bottle or two. And those are great events. That's a great way to kind of expand your palate and expand your journey through wine, which is a lot of fun along the way. So he does those things, and we'll be doing some of those once we get through all this and can kind of get back to some sense of normal. And we can all kind of hang out again. But Killer Vino, definitely absolutely a great guy to know. And you'll hear about him when we do these shows, just because he's a great resource to get these wines in your hands. But back to the wines, man. We're on to which one?
So we just did Terima Monastrell, coming from the Alicante region. Let's just go up a little bit northwest to Rioja. The area we all know and love, the one that's making the headlines most of the time. Now, this is for good reason, because of the proximity to France, and throughout the history, this is kind of one of the first established areas that really, really made a name for itself. So people did recognize this as phenomenal wines, or the first serious growing region in Spain, and this is hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So. And we talk about the proximity to Spain, to France, right over the Pyrenees Mountains there. But a lot of influences. Actually, it's been known that French people were actually coming down there. As France, endured a lot of different things, whether it was the root louse phylloxera devastating everything over there, really slowed down their wine trade. And then, just different obstacles that have been thrown that way, like powdery mildew or things of that sort. But that's for another time. But, it's certainly for good reason, because some of the best wines still to this day that are coming out of Spain are coming from this little area. So you have a lot of experience in this area, ideal growing conditions, ideal temps, basically everything, the stars aligned. And it's just a wonderful region to talk about. And, what I didn't mention earlier was I talked about Tempranillo. When it's done bad, it's very bad. But when it's done right, it's very, very, a very good, age-worthy, phenomenal bottle of wine. So, but, what we're doing is keeping with the theme here, is expressing values coming out of Spain. And so we're going to basically taste a wine from a producer called Viña Bujanda. It's actually a brother-sister team. Again, a lot of history within the family of wine growers and wine producers. They bring something to the table, and that really does express the value in these wines. They don't make something super, super high-end that really makes it kind of out of reach for a lot of people. They make everyday good Rioja wines that anybody can access and really enjoy. So we'll be tasting their Crianza. So when I talk about Crianza, or when I mention Rioja Reserva, we're talking about just certain age limits. Now, by law, they have to have certain aging requirements to to put those things on label. Now, Crianza is one of the younger ones that they produce. The minimum on that is going to be at least age 1 year in oak. So we're talking about kind of bare bones requirements, and they actually have one certainly younger than that doesn't require any sort of aging on it by law, and they do produce those as well. But I think what the good thing about Tempranillo is just with a little age slapped on it, they can actually produce some really, really good wines. So we'll get to experience their Bujanda Crianza from this wonderful region.
I'm going to tell you, man, you can pronounce these. I don't know, when it comes to Italian and French names of these wines and regions and things, I'm impressed with the way you can pronounce these.
I try to do my best, and it's what we try to do is just do the proper pronunciations. And look, there's really no right and wrong. A perfect example is when we talk about Catena wines. I've heard so many different variations of how people say Catena, and I like to just let people know, or at least inform them, and then from there you can take it and say it however you want. I've heard people say Cantina, I've heard people say Catina. It's whatever you want to do it. It's just in reference to. But if you ever go to the winery or experience it or talk to friends, I just want to let you have that tidbit of information of the proper pronunciation. And I've been known to mispronunciate a lot of things as well, because when we get to the Portugal segment, that'll make your head spin around. There's some really difficult ones there when we talk about the varietals and the regions and things like that.
I just don't want to get to a point where I find a wine I like a lot and then I can't say the name to be able to order it. I'm going to have to look it up and, send it to Rob in a text or an email, because good Lord, I'm not going to be able to say the names of these things.
Yeah. But,
anyway,
and so that takes us to the next region. We're going to go to the Campo de Borja region, which is really not far away from Rioja there. So this is within the Aragon region, and a lot of history in this particular area. So the Campo de Borja region is a very interesting region. Proximity, again, to France. It's actually nestled right below the Pyrenees Mountains. And then you actually have a smaller mountain range. They call it a mountain range, but it's more like three peaks. And the wine that we're going to be experiencing is called Tres Picos, referring to the three peaks that are really close to that area, and really create like a perfect little microclimate when we talk about, or a mesoclimate, I would say, when we talk about what makes these wines special. And the particular producer, Bodegas Borsal, has been making wines and selling wines internationally for a long, long time. And to me, they are, and not to say that anybody else isn't, that we mentioned earlier, but I think that these are some of the best values in the world, hands down, is the Garnacha wines that are coming from this area. Garnacha is when I talk about Garnacha, we're referring to Grenache. As you know, Grenache is grown in many, many other areas of the world. But and all this information is subject to opinion. But I think what people are finding out is Garnacha actually did originate in Spain.
Oh, did it really?
So, I think that there's a lot of evidence to kind of point back in that direction that it did originate there. But as you know, the French do a really good job with Grenache, and I've actually seen a lot of domestic producers doing Garnachas and Grenache. It's not the easiest wine to grow, or not the easiest grape to grow. It's a little fickle, but when we talk about this particular region, all the stars aligned. We have perfect growing conditions there. It's somewhat very dry and hot there. In certain parts of the season, we have some pretty big diurnal swings there as far as temp goes. But there's a wind that is constantly blowing through there. It's called the Cierzo, and this kind of works like the Mistral in France, where basically you talk about this hot, dry, arid area with a lot of sun exposure, but we have this natural fan just blowing these grapes, so kind of keeping them moderately cool. And this is very important because I think if it wasn't for that wind, it probably wouldn't be able to produce Garnacha in this area, seeing how hot it gets over there. But we'll dive into that a little bit more in detail. But the fantastic wine of Garnacha is just absolutely amazing, and that kind of screams value to me. And don't take it from me. If you ever have the opportunity, go to bodegasborsao.com. You go to their website, and what they do is they lead with, on that front page, they're going to have a bunch of different reviews from different publications. Robert Parker, James Suckling, Jancis Robinson, some of the big hitters out there. And it's funny because they all said the same word all throughout those reviews. And the one word that kind of sticks around with everybody is value.
Wow.
I think it was Parker actually said this Bodegas Borsao is not only the best value in Spain, but in the world. And that's pretty powerful for him to say. And these guys drink wines from all over the world on a regular basis. So that's kind of a big win. But the thing about Bodegas Borsao, it's a big operation, and they sell a lot of wines internationally. I was pretty surprised to see, when I go to other countries and we see Bodegas Borsao in these areas, it's really, really surprising. But appropriately so. I mean, it's just a phenomenal wine for a great price point.
Yeah, and what's cool to me is to learn about all these wines in Spain because, when you think about traveling, Simon, I think if I want to travel and enjoy wine, I think about France, I think about Italy. I've always thought Spain would be really cool to visit, but I was always like, man, I want to make sure I have some good wine. And I'm figuring out now that Spain has some fantastic wine, and, what a beautiful country too. The culture and the history there, along with, France and Italy, they're all three just great places to go visit and enjoy wine and explore some different, varietals, some different techniques of making wine, and they all kind of have their own place in the old world.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to me, that is a major part of experiencing wines. Now, it's great to take it home and experience these with everyday cuisine or something that you might want to cook at home. But as I mentioned I think we talked about this in the Catena Appellation Series podcast, it's, to me, the experience of being there really certainly does add to that. Now, this is kind of difficult because we're in no travel times right now. And as a matter of fact, I was supposed to be there at the end of May. We were going to go to Portugal and Spain. But we just, we had to cancel that, and it officially canceled. We were able to retrieve most of that money. So it was very heartbreaking for me. I was really looking forward to that again. But, when we talk about the experiences and when we talked about the Catena wines and experiencing that there and the culture and the food and just everything put together kind of really, really does elevate your tasting experience. I talked to a lot of people do travel to Italy, and, the one common thing that I hear about from everybody is just like, we have this phenomenal wine that we can't get over here. And we had it for like super, super cheap. And they just describe the whole experience as a whole, get to drink a few bottles of really, really inexpensive wine with phenomenal food. Meanwhile, they're overlooking a lake. It's just the whole experience put together really does add to that. And what we want to try to do is kind of recreate that. We talk about, and Rob, I've got to give you kudos, man, because I love the page on social media, and I love the group that you're a part of because, man, there's some really good stuff being cooked on these posts.
What group is that? What group are you talking about?
The food, wine, and whiskey in your backyard.
That's right. So same as a podcast.
From your. What's that?
I said same as a podcast. So I want you to give me a plug so all the listeners, if they're not a member of our group, they need to jump on Facebook and get in the group. It's fun. We have people from all over the country and some people from around the globe that are in the group, and it's fun to see what everybody's doing, to your point, but I'm just trying to give myself a cheap plug. But thank you, Simon.
Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't been on that page for very, very long, but ever since then, I'm very inspired by what a lot of people are doing, and we're not just talking about, somebody cooking something for dinner. You guys have posts about what you're doing for breakfast, lunch, dinner, new restaurant openings, your favorite restaurants, different wines or whiskeys that you guys are drinking that night, and it's very educational. I mean, I see some of these things and I say, I've never had that whiskey before. And, it kind of leads me in to go look for that particular bottle. And we hope to do the same thing with some of the wines that we're presenting on these segments or these programs. But yeah, it's super interesting, and it's going to be tough for me because sometimes I will see a nice juicy porterhouse that somebody's cooking, with just an incredible rub on there, and they show that picture, and then I automatically have to go to the store and say, hey, well, honey, I'm sorry, but we're eating porterhouse for the next few days. So
exactly.
it's gonna be tough, but yeah, I encourage anybody to log on and follow this group. It's a lot of fun.
I appreciate that,
in a real casual manner. Yeah. But yeah, those are kind of the regions and the wines that we're going to be talking about coming up. And, not to give Rob another plug here, but what we did last time with the Catena Appellation series is we encourage people to kind of grab these wines and taste along with us. My biggest thing in this particular line of business is I love to hear feedback. This is very important to us because honestly, at this particular position that I'm in, as an importer, all this feedback gets listened to, and it's not to say that, we take a lot of feedback and collectively we say, hey, well, would it be better if we do this instead? Or maybe people are looking for this style of wine a little bit more, and this particular producer can do something of that sort. So all this actually gets heard, and, we send it up the line, and we've got a fantastic team of people at main office in different parts of the country. And like I said, they take all this feedback, like we put it together, and they try to basically answer the request that people may have. So it's very important. Feedback is very, very important to us as well.
Yeah. I always say you can't know what you're not doing right unless somebody tells you, right?
Exactly. And so what we want to do is encourage everybody to kind of taste along with us. So if you want to get just a few bottles of that lineup that we're presenting, I know that 6 wines is a lot, but it doesn't mean you have to necessarily open all 6 wines, or you don't even have to buy all 6 wines, But we encourage you maybe just to experience it, and then maybe crack open a bottle with us.
Yeah, get a white and get a red, Drink one of the whites and one of the reds. It'll be fun. And if you like that, then at least you'll have a reference for the other, 4 to 5 wines. And maybe you'll hit Rob up or hit the grocery store or the wine store and buy a couple more bottles. I think that'd be great. And it's a lot of fun. You dive in a little deeper, and I think you do a great job, Simon. And I've had feedback from the people who were on the Catena tasting that they just loved being able to learn more. And I think people who are into wine, not just for drinking it, but to actually, get into it and explore it. Where's it from? How's it made? The story behind the people who are making that wine. You do a really good job of getting into that when we do these things. And so it's going to be a lot of fun, man. I'm hoping a lot of people will jump on, and it starts at 6, and we just kind of go until we're done and people are done asking questions and, chit chatting. It's a learning experience, but it's also a little social event. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I think, at this position, what I've noticed over the years is certainly we can talk about, what the oak regimens is, what the percentage for varietal breakdown is, what something is, what the acidity levels are, what the alcohol levels are. But what's funny is all that's important to certainly know. But at the end of the day, it's all about the tiny little stories that these wineries tell. And it's about those things that you can't really Google, that I'd like to share with you guys. And, I don't have many. I'm certainly not the best. We actually have a guy that works for our company, and he is the master of storytelling. He's actually been to several of these different wineries a couple of times over, whereas I experienced a few of them over time. But this guy basically tells these stories that you can't really find out unless you talk to somebody at the winery.
Right.
And to me, that's kind of what draws people in, is those little stories. And I don't want to bore you guys with, what was the aspect? Is this a southern exposure? Blah blah blah. Like I said, that kind of loses people after a while. We're not going to get it too much into that, but if certainly somebody asks the question, I will answer. But like I said, we share those little stories, those fun little tidbits of information that you really can't get anywhere else.
And I think, you're exactly right. I had a winemaker in Napa tell me, and I think he's right. I think it's to the point of, get one of these bottles, get two of these bottles and just taste along with us, because he said to me, and it made a lot of sense, the first thing you do is taste the wine. And after you taste and you figure out, hey, I like this wine, that's when you want to start learning more about the wine and who makes the wine and the history and the family and the story behind the wine. And so that's what makes wine great. You have to taste it first. And if you don't like it, you could care less about the story. It doesn't intrigue you. But if you like that wine, that's when you really want to dig deep and dive into it. And so that's why we think it's important, if we're going to do this next week, go buy one bottle, go buy two bottles, and just drink along with us. It'll be in today's time, what we're going through, that's going to be a great Wednesday night, right? What else are you doing? You might as well grab a couple bottle of wine and hang out with us a little bit.
Yeah. And I'll try my best, we'll try to keep up. And I know, Rob, you're always cooking some really, really great stuff on your end over there, but we always encourage people to kind of jump in with us. I don't know, maybe I might fire up a paella next Wednesday and have with some of these wonderful whites.
Well, that's not a bad idea. So. A paella would be a lot of fun. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So. Well, anything else we want to say about Spain before we say goodbye to everybody?
No, I think we covered most of it, and we'll touch a little bit more in depth, and maybe we can kind of dive a little bit more in the history of Spain as we just kind of want to bring you a little bit more new information. So
cool.
We don't want to give it to you all at once, but we will certainly mention some of these things next Wednesday. But that's pretty much it, Rob.
All right, man.
Is there anything, any questions that you had?
No, none at all. I want to say thank you to everybody for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. Look on the Facebook group, Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. I will be posting these 6 wines of what we'll be drinking next week and tasting on the Zoom tasting. I'll let you know a couple places you might be able to pick them up. And we look forward to having you guys join us on the Zoom tasting. But until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.